Welcome to Magic Arcanum, I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. And what a story time it is, because today we're covering one of the side stories from Magic's newest set, Innistrad Crimson Vow. So first, let me thank Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring this video and giving us an early look at the text, which you can now find, along with everything else happening in the story, using the link down below. But maybe you're more of a visual person. That's cool too, because I've got a link in the description that will take you to the Crimson Vow cinematic trailer, which really helps set the mood for this set. Innistrad in general is a very moody place, from the brooding Sorin Markov to the sadistic brother and sister pair of Gisa and Geralf. But our story today focuses on a lesser known character as he faces off against, well, you'll just have to follow along with us. Our tale is called The Devouring House, and it opens with the vampire noble Strefan Mauer in a sticky situation. You see, that's because he's fallen into a pit lined with sticks. But more on that in a second. The plane of Innistrad is filled with monsters of many types. Surely you're familiar with zombies and spirits and werewolves, and of course, the vampires. But you might not know that the vampires can actually be further separated by their bloodline, all of which can be traced back to a ritual performed by the one Edgar Markov thousands of years ago. But that is a story for another time. The Markov name, though, that is still worth talking about. Many of the Markov vampires were killed by the planeswalker Nahiri during the events of Shadows over Innistrad, though Sorin and his grandfather Edgar are both still around and appear in the main story for Crimson Vow. Other notable bloodlines include Voldaren, Falconwrath, and Stromkirk, but Strefan here is part of a much smaller house, so it's okay if his name is unfamiliar to you. Like most vampires, he's still used to getting his own way, though, which is why he's very unhappy to find himself at the bottom of a pit trap set for him by a human named Brant. Fortunately, he landed with his weight spread out across many of the wooden stakes, which saved him from being speared by any single one of them. And this is where we learn our first bit about Strefan's personality. He is quite resourceful. He pulls up one of the wooden stakes and hurls it up to the edge of the pit, clipping the watching Brant. This buys him some time to climb up and out of the pit, where he finds a trail of blood that turns into a trail of hoofprints. Brant has fled on his horse, and we learn a bit more about Strefan. The dude knows how to hold a grudge. So he begins to chase Brant through the thinning forest, eventually coming to an open plain dominated by a lone ruined building. Innistrad is an old place, so finding random abandoned structures isn't that odd. But this wouldn't be an Innistrad story without something odd happening. And believe me when I say things are about to get weird. Strefan follows Brant into the ruin, and they have a brief scuffle. Brant fights off the vampire first with a dagger, and then surprises him by attacking with another hidden sword that's a bit longer. At this point, Strefan is on the ropes. He hasn't fed in a while, he's weak, and he's just been slashed open pretty good by Brant, who is clearly about to win this fight. But then, Brant does something unexpected. He uses his dagger to cut his own throat, and he falls to the floor dead. Strefan is confused, but takes a moment to bind his wounds, and then tries to lap up the pool of blood gathering around the fallen human, only to find that he can't. It's seeping down into the stone floor of the ruins, almost as if it's being consumed by the building itself. That building, by the way, also appears to now be restored to its former glory. Strefan looks around in wonder, finding the place familiar, but he can't quite put his finger on why. Strephon realizes this was Brant's plan all along. The pit trap was just to lure him into a much larger and more sophisticated trap, and he had completely fallen for it in his lust for blood. So we can add that to our growing list of things we know about Strephon Mauer, and we can maybe start to see why this bloodline isn't as prominent as some of the others on the plane. Anyway, Strephon attempts to open the front door to the mysterious building that has sprung into existence all around him. The door won't move, so he pushes harder and harder until he falls right through it and then finds himself not outside, but back in the middle of the room where he just started. So yeah, we've got classic, creepy, haunted house stuff going on here, which is right at home on Innistrad. Strephon takes a moment to collect his thoughts and reflect on what he actually knows about Brant, hoping that there might be a clue in their history together as to why he would set a trap like this. It turns out they go back decades. Brant had attacked Strephon when he was posing as a human and walking through a village in search of prey, and the two have been at odds with each other ever since. Strephon hadn't seen Brant in a few years though, so he figured another vampire had gotten him when suddenly he appeared in yet another small village. Brant didn't seem to notice Strephon though, so the vampire decided he would stalk him into the forest and be rid of him once and for all, a decision which he is now clearly starting to regret. Strephon is then overcome with a feeling of weakness, and he realizes he needs to stop his trip down memory lane and instead find a way out of this cursed building, which seems to be draining his strength the longer he's here. That is when he notices Brant's corpse is starting to move. Strephon watches in disbelief as Brant stands back up and starts to clumsily chase him around the room. Eventually their eyes meet, and Strephon realizes that this might still be the body of Brant, but whatever's driving it now is not the man he knew. When asked, "Who are you?" the shambling corpse responds with the death wails of a dozen different animals. Dogs, rabbits, pigs, wolves, all things Strephon realizes were lured here to be consumed by the entity that has now possessed Brant's body. So, that's kind of terrifying. Strephon tries to stall for time and again questions the creature, but this time asks, "What are you?" rather than "who." The thing pauses and sticks a hand into its own chest to dig out the last bit of blood from its stopped heart, and then uses it to write a single word on the wall. Hladvora. Which really clears things up, right? Strephon says the word out loud, even though it means nothing to him, and the creature resumes its attack, now with a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. As they continue their deadly dance, the creature continues to change itself. Its legs stretch out like a bird's, and its face widens out with the eyes pushing to the side. Creepy! Strephon manages to knock it to the ground and then tries to choke it, which is an interesting tactic to use on something clearly undead, but hey, I don't know if I would have come up with anything better in his situation, so. The creature goes limp, and Strephon snaps its neck, probably just out of habit at this point. Satisfied that the creature has given up Brant's body entirely, Strephon then tries to exit the building again before remembering that front door really doesn't work. Suddenly, a new door appears on the opposite wall, inviting the vampire to explore deeper into this terrifying structure. Strephon passes through the door, which vanishes behind him, and he finds himself in a new room. The opposite wall of this room comes to life and takes the distorted form of his own mother. I say distorted because her limbs are all stretched out and her voice isn't quite right, but Strephon is flooded with feelings of his childhood anyway. He pictures his real mother, smells her perfume, hears her voice, and is kind of frozen in shock as this imposter closes in on him. The terrified Strephon rushes for yet another door, one that he's not entirely sure was there a moment ago, and he finds himself in yet another room, now feeling completely exhausted. He realizes the creature is still toying with him and must be feeding on his fear and other emotions. The longer he stays in the house, the more danger he's going to be in. So again, Strephon pushes onward in search of an exit. He winds up in a room that looks like his father's study, a room he was forbidden from entering as a child. Paranoia starts to creep in, and Strephon looks around the room, waiting for the creature to take a new form and attack him again. But that doesn't happen. Instead, he falls through the floor and lands on the wounds from the stake pit, causing them to flare with fresh pain. This new room is a bedroom, but it's trimmed in black banners, which we learn are used by vampires when they're mourning. And on the room's bed is Strephon's father, laid out exactly the way Strephon had done before leaving his family home forever and pledging to himself he'd never die. That's why he is the Maurer progenitor. His parents were not vampires, and they died, most likely from the famine that struck Innistrad thousands of years ago, the one that caused Edgar Markov to turn to blood for sustenance. Strephon stands there, now overcome with sadness and probably guilt, which then quickly turn to terror as the reproduction of his father opens its eyes and begins to sit up. Once again, Strephon realizes there is something wrong with the eyes, and he tries to cling to that fact. This isn't my father, he tells himself. It's wrong, it's all wrong. Strephon continues to resist the illusion, and it starts to fade out. The splendid bedroom walls are replaced with the ruins again, and also reveal piles of dead animals, and even a dead human, which is likely the real Brant. Strephon realizes, though, he is still truly standing in his family house, or at least what remains of it. He wonders how this could be possible, telling himself he left the twins here to prevent this, which is a nice callback to a card from Shadows over Innistrad, and one of the only other references to the Maurer family name within the game. Nevertheless, that mystery will have to be solved another time, because the creature comes for Strephon again, still in the form of his long-dead father. Strephon fights back and manages to break open his father's body, which reveals the Hladvora's true form, and it is grotesque. The two continue to struggle. Strephon manages to pin the slippery monster to the ground and repeats his favorite tactic from earlier, choking the life out of it. At least this time the thing really is alive. He squeezes it with everything he has left, feeling it grow weaker and weaker until it suddenly bursts apart in a torrent of blood. Starving, Strephon tries to drink from the puddles, but he's unable to get anything from them, just like the last time. Frustrated, Strephon picks himself up and walks out of the ruins, which are now, once again, truly ruins. All of the illusions are gone, and the last bits of the creature have soaked back into the ground. Strephon reflects on how he still might be lucky enough to find a passing traveler and feed upon them, which will keep him alive. But failing that, maybe his time really is at an end. Clearly still shaken from his encounter with the supernatural creature that had taken up residence in his family home, Strephon Maurer sets out into the night, increasingly aware that his own mortality might have finally caught up with him. And that's it. That's what happens in the Devouring House, one of the side stories for Crimson Vow. We started with a character we knew almost nothing about and dropped him into a perfectly creepy haunted house as only Innistrad can provide. We watched him confront his own surprise, terror, sadness, fatigue, and finally his own sense of vulnerability as he dealt with a manipulative entity within the ruins of his ancestral home. And we were left with a sense of pity? Maybe. For a lone vampire who for once experienced a sliver of the terror he had spent a dozen lifetimes inflicting upon the humans that populate the plane. I think this was a very well constructed story. It takes advantage of magic's greatest strengths, right? The world building here is top notch, and the journey through Strafan's moods as he confronted everything the house could throw at him kept me engaged the entire time. If you also enjoyed this story, I invite you to find its siblings over on the official story page using the link down below. But first, put yourself in the mood by experiencing the Crimson Vow cinematic trailer, which you can also find buried in the crypt beneath this video. Thanks again to Wizards of the Coast for providing me with an advanced copy of The Devouring House. Nicole and I love looking at the lore behind the cards here on our show, and we'll have a full recap of everything that happens in Crimson Vow pretty soon. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!